The Dark Troopers were a set of extremely advanced battle droids which utilized incredibly strong exoskeletons and were protected by heavy plating that resembled the standard armor of a stormtrooper. These Dark Troopers carried very powerful weapons and even jump packs, which allowed them to leap high into the air with ease. So with The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 4 confirming that Moff Gideon is creating an army of Dark Trooper soldiers, I'm going to break down exactly what the Dark Troopers are and every single variant of them that we currently know. So before we get into it, make sure to smash the subscribe button for more awesome Mandalorian Season 2 content. The Dark Trooper project was created during the time of the Empire by the highly esteemed General Rom Mohc. During the Clone Wars, Rom Mohc served in the Galactic Republic army as a non-clone officer, and while there, he began to develop an obsession with cybernetics and hand-to-hand combat. Because of his love for hand-to-hand combat and respect for discipline, he absolutely hated superweapons like the Death Star, and instead began to work on a project that would later be known as the Dark Trooper project, inside of his customized starship called the Arkhammer. This project actually had 4 main phases, so I'll break them all down. Phase 0 of the project began when Mohc put his cybernetic skills to use, turning veteran clones from the Clone Wars into gruesome and horrible cyborgs, with their bodies mangled and disfigured into the perfect cybernetically enhanced soldiers. This part of the Imperial Dark Trooper project wasn't officially authorized or funded by Imperial leadership, and these troopers were therefore known as the Phase 0 Dark Troopers. Phase 0 was the first and the last phase of the project to use biological life forms. As the Empire began to phase the clone troopers out of the ranks of the Imperial army, not long after the Clone Wars, Phase 0 Dark Troopers began to become far less common, and the entire project was eventually shut down. Despite no new Phase 0 Dark Troopers being created, many of them still served in the Imperial army, and it became pretty clear to the Imperial leadership that the efficiency of these soldiers was a step above anything the Rebel Alliance could come up against. The Phase 0 soldiers were usually equipped with simple blast cannons or modified E11 blaster rifles, also known as arc casters. On top of this, they also used the SE-14R light repeating blaster as a sidearm and carried a large supply of thermal detonators with them also. Eventually, the Phase 0 troopers continued to be used on the battlefields all the way until shortly before the Battle of Yavin. Some years later, the Dark Trooper project was finally greenlit and funded by Imperial leadership, allowing Phase 1 of the operation to begin. The main goal of the project this time was to create the next generation of stormtroopers who were stronger, faster and more agile than human-born soldiers. And after I go through all of the phases of the Dark Trooper program, let me know down below which one you prefer. Do you think it's more effective to have a massive brute and focus on strength? Or do you think it's more effective to have a thin, less strong, but more agile unit? The Phase 1 Dark Trooper was the earliest, fully cybernetic battle droid of the project, and was nothing more than a lightsaber-resistant skeletal frame equipped with a standard issue vibro sword attached to its right arm and a blast shield for its left arm. Because the Phase 1 Dark Troopers were so primitive, they served primarily as a defense droid at Imperial military installations, and were actually incredible at this role. Again, because the Phase 1 Dark Troopers were created so early in the project, the scientists working on them weren't able to figure out a way to hide their visible and loose power cords just yet, creating many significant weak spots for the cybernetic soldier. Finally, the Phase 1 Dark Troopers were given small jump packs, which they could either use to jump higher into the air than their regular cybernetic legs would allow them, or they could divert that power to make their vibroblades vibrate faster, causing absolute carnage when they came up against the flesh of a regular human or biological soldier. Eventually, the Phase 2 version of the Dark Troopers were created, and they were equipped with a very similar suit, the same jump pack, and were now even given a large, fully automatic weapon known as the Assault Cannon. This repeater rifle was a massive 1.2 meters long and fired a horrifying lethal plasma ammunition that was capable of punching through almost any type of body armor and would kill soldiers in a single shot. Only soldiers equipped with a personal energy shield could hope to stand any chance against the Phase 2 Dark Troopers with this weapon. These Phase 2 troopers were eventually deployed by the Empire against the Rebel Alliance Operations Center at Tak Base in the brutal conflict that became known as the Attack on Tak Base. The attack on this Rebel facility was a direct retaliation for the destruction of the Death Star by Luke Skywalker, and was intended to strike a deadly fear into the hearts of all Rebel sympathizers. After the attack, Mon Mothma and the others in the rebel leadership became incredibly concerned about the potential threat of these new Dark Troopers and gave Kyle Katarn the nearly impossible task of destroying the Dark Trooper program as a whole. Following that was the brutish and savage Phase 3 Dark Troopers. These were the most powerful units in the Dark Trooper program and absolutely dwarfed the Phase 2 model in both strength and size. Just like the Phase 2 units, the Phase 3 ones carried a large handheld assault cannon, but paired it with two shoulder-mounted Seeker missile launcher racks that were hidden under the suit's shoulder plates when not in use. The Phase 3 units were also given a massive supply of fragmentation charges, thermal detonators, and concussion blast charges to aid them in case they were ever placed in a tough situation. The Phase 3 droids also wore deep black coloured armour made of the lightsaber resistant and nearly indestructible material known as Frick, mined from the moon Gromass 16. This armour was of course capable of protecting against almost all enemy blaster fire, lightsabers, and electro staves. Rom Mohc and the others within the Empire believed that if this Phase 3 technology had reached its full potential and was manufactured on a large scale, that it would have produced the absolute perfect battlefield infantry unit. These units would contain a mixture of a clone's creativity, unpredictability, and initiative, combined with the resilience and firepower of a separatist battle droid. Unfortunately, because of their extreme complexity and cost, only a small number of Phase 3 Dark Troopers were ever constructed and used in the service of the Imperial Army. One of these very few Phase 3 models was actually adapted and used as a suit of exoskeleton armor by Rom Mohc himself, the creator of the program, making him incredibly strong. And let me know down below which phase of the program you think Moff Gideon's Dark Troopers will be most likely to match. They could be using Phase 0 with humans inside of the suits, as we did see the scientists inside of the building, but we could also see a Phase 2 version being completely mechanical. Who knows, maybe they're even trying to create an army of Force-sensitive Dark Troopers. In addition to these three main phases of the Dark Trooper program, many variants of these robotic soldiers were also created as experimental units. These include the Oppressor 7 class Dark Troopers, which were armed with EE3 carbine, standard issue E11 carbines, stun batons, and sometimes even DXR6 disruptor rifles. The Glory class Dark Troopers, who carried the same weaponry but also T21 light repeating blasters. The Elite Dark Troopers, who were armed with SE-14C blasters alongside a variety of blast charges, fragmentation charges, and concussion charges. The Exogen class Dark Troopers, who served as law enforcement troopers around various Imperial cities. And finally, the Triumphant class troopers, who were known to have escorted Darth Vader during several of his missions, and the Dark Nova troopers, who specialized in boarding enemy vehicles, most commonly specializing in boarding rebel vehicles. There were a few other variants like the Oppressor 9, the Victory class, and the Black Hole Dark Troopers, but not much is known about those ones. Eventually, Kyle Katarn's mission came to a head when he was able to board Rom Mohc's ship, the Arkhammer. Rom Mohc initially didn't believe that Katarn was a threat whatsoever, but after hearing that he had infiltrated the Executor, stole a cargo container, and boarded his own ship, Mohc began to take Katarn's threat very seriously. In response to this, Mohc suited up in his own creation, placing himself inside of his Phase 3 Dark Trooper exoskeleton armor. As Katarn fought vigorously through Mohc's Dark Trooper defense forces on board the ship, he eventually found himself inside of the same antechamber where Mohc was waiting for him. After Katarn destroyed all 7 of the Dark Troopers that guarded the chamber, Mohc revealed himself and an intense final battle went down. Kyle Katarn was eventually able to wither down Rom Mohc's furious barrage of attacks, eventually slaying the old Imperial and escaping the Arkhammer before he detonated blast charges on board, destroying the vessel in a large red fireball. So that leads us straight back to the Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 4 connection. It was actually confirmed by the English descriptive audio setting on Disney Plus that Moff Gideon is creating an army of Dark Troopers for use by his Imperial remnant. So those are the Imperial Dark Troopers from Star Wars Dark Forces and later the Battlefront games and Star Wars Galaxies. Let's hope we get some more information on them in the Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 5, Chapter 13 next week. Thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers guys, hope to see you in the next one.